Right, everyone. So our next talk is by James Smith. I'm really pleased to be introducing James because I do a fellow Sports Viz Sunday with him. So if ever you wanted to look at a Tableau public profile that had some amazing sports vizzes, I'd strongly suggest check out James because it's one of the best profiles you could possibly wish to see. And he's also currently a featured author. So on that note, it seems quite appropriate for him to talk about Tableau at work and Tableau at home. So, James, over to you.
Thanks very much, Simon. Very kind introduction, and been dropping in and out of some of the other great talks today. So thanks to all of your team for organising this and keeping it running. So yeah, as my title suggests, and as you mentioned, my key message today is how the things that I do at home flow into the things that I do at work, and vice versa. So I'll start with a brief introduction. Relatively new to the whole field of data visualization relative to some of the other speakers on here, but studied at Bristol University doing geography and statistics, and that is where my interest in data started. My research project in my third year, so my dissertation, was all about whether the driver or the car was more important in Formula One, and involved some modelling, and eventually we came out with the conclusion that it is the car that is more important, but that the relative importance has varied quite substantially over time. So a little bit more on Formula One later because it's something exciting that we've got lined up for Sports Viz Sundays. So I'm currently at EY. Some of you might know that as Ernst & Young, some of you might not know that at all. It is a professional services firm. There is loads of people that work for EY. I think there's about 240,000 of us worldwide. And I thought that this visual CV, something that I created a couple of weeks ago, was a good starting point for talking about who I am and how I plan to go forward. So this is the way that I designed this was because it came from an issue that we're having in our resourcing team where everyone has to create their own EY CV, and at the moment they're blank PowerPoint screens and people fill in their experience, and I thought that it'd be great for our resourcing team to have a visual way of sorting through different people's profiles so that they could more effectively allot the resources that we have in the firm to different projects based on their skills. So that's kind of the first little example of the way that something that I found was an issue at work was something that I worked on while I was at home, and this has helped our resourcing team to go forward. A little bit on my journey. As I mentioned, while I was at university, I started getting into data, but I didn't really know a huge amount about any of the tools that would allow you to do it. So a resource like Tableau would have been incredibly useful while I was writing that, because all of the graphs that I made were Excel based, or they came out of ggplot, which is an R package, which was incredibly useful, but it's involves quite a lot of code and scripting, so it's far easier using a click and drop and drag tool like Tableau to create visualizations. So first time I started using it at EY was in our audit department. So I've been lucky enough to move around different departments. I was in the fraud investigation department for a while, and then I spent a bit of time in our audit department, and now I'm in our FAS, which is the financial advisory department. So it's more of a consulting role. So my first data viz was actually in Spotfire, which is a great tool as well. We were making tools for the auditors to select samples, and basically when they received huge data sets, they wanted to see things visually so that they could have a look at whether there was any outliers, any particular samples that the audit team could then go in and have a look at and request information on. And then my first experience with Tableau came in September. I'm looking at these dates, it looks like I've just put them in March, September, but it is actually the order that they appeared in. So September 2016, I joined a team that basically wanted an app that they could put on an iPad and take out in a pitch to explain a new proof of concept that we were putting together at EY. So I had to learn Tableau from scratch and put something together in a few weeks. And looking back on it, there's tons of things I would have changed, but wasn't a bad effort for a first try. And the partners liked it, and they were able to take it out on iPads using Tableau online, and it was a good success in the end. In March, I started SportsCord, so that is my Twitter handle and where my blog is based. The name comes from the chord diagram. So it was an idea I had. I'd been scrolling through a few different things, and this is the first ever SportsCord print. So the idea was that I'd seen a couple of shops on Etsy selling lots of basically the prints with information, and no one yet had combined the information with something that looked visually attractive that could go on a wall. So this was version 1 of SportsCord. It's written in R. It uses a script, and I've been refining that script over well, since I started last March, and now it's a completely automated script where I can type in the name of the team that I want, and it'll scroll through and spit out the design at the end. And this is version 2, which is currently what I've got on the Etsy website for different teams. In September 2017, we had a new scheme at EY called the Data Ninjas. One of the partners suggested the name, and we have been working to create a scheme where it allows people throughout assurance, which is the wider department at EY, to learn all about data. So we've got 25 people starting on Monday, actually. And it ties in with a new scheme called EY Badges, which allows people to concentrate on earning what we call future focused skills, which happily includes data visualization and data integration, information strategy. And then finally, this is the first time I have spoken, so it's a milestone in my kind of data viz journey as well. So first, Tableau at work. So dashboards, a lot of people at EY ask me for dashboards, and a lot of the time they don't really know what they want on their dashboards. They just say, I want something, for example, in our climate change team, I want something that shows on a map how sustainable countries are, or the effects of sea rise change. But a lot of the time, we don't always have the data available. So they say, oh, well, if you can just mock it up, use some fake data, and then we'll see where we are, and we can hopefully present that to a client. So my first tip would be, in those scenarios, make sure that the team that you're working for knows that creating fake data is actually pretty difficult and time consuming, especially when you want it to tell a particular story. So be wary of that. It's always a lot more fun and interesting to work with real data, but often it'll be inaccessible, or it won't be in the right format, or there won't be the time available to produce something really high quality. So they say they will just make something up, and then if they like it and if they pay some more money, then we'll go ahead and take all their data and get into the back end, as well as the designing the front end as well. Analysis, this is my favorite part of Tableau at work. These are more one-off projects where you do get the real data. They have a question, they have a hypothesis, you have to go away and test that, and you come back with an answer, often in a visualized format. So I actually see the way that things are going, although a lot of people at the moment like to see screenshots, they prefer things in PowerPoint than in Tableau because that's what they're familiar with. I see a future in which you'll go as an analyst and you'll sit with the clients and you'll answer their questions in real time, where they have a question about the data, you'll sift through it in front of them in Tableau so they can see the thought process and see what's going on. And at the end, they'll be happy and you'll be happy. And I'm sure there is a lot of organizations out there doing that at the moment, but not quite got to that step at EY yet in my department. Branding, I'm sure lots of people have spoken about this today. especially in corporate worlds where you've got particular branding colors, and if you want to have logos as well. So I was actually going to share a quick tip on getting the branding out into your dashboard. I'm sure a lot of people already know how to do this, but in my Tableau repository, you've got the preferences, and if you open that with a text editor like Notepad, you can actually see the different colors. And in that, if you go to your branding team, you can find the hex codes for the colors and put that in as a color palette. And then when you go into Tableau, sure enough, you can have a look at your colors, and at the bottom, your custom color palettes will be there. So EY happens to love the grays. So we've got yellow and then our 4-5 grays. Finally, learning. As I've said, I'm quite lucky in that I work in a large organization, so there is tons of resources out there that help my learning. But also, I wouldn't have started with Tableau if it hadn't been for someone asking me to do something that I didn't know how to do before. So often when there's a demand to do something, you will push yourself further than you would do if you were just doing it for fun, because you feel like you have to get the outputs out and ready. So I find learning by doing is really the best way of learning at all. So moving on to Tableau at home. For me, Tableau at home is using it in my business Sports Chord for the design and for writing posts on my blog. So with the design for Sports Chord, I can be a lot more garish, because it's, at the end of the day, I'm trying to reduce something that will not look nice on somebody's wall, because the purpose at the moment of the business is to create these wall prints that people will then buy and give as gifts. I think the main recipient of my my Etsy prints are probably nerdy men with who love sports, but yeah, actually my key customer, someone who's asked me for several different things, is a lady who keeps on coming back and asks me for different things. So being able to do visualizations for sports that I don't know much about. So recently I put one together for cricket. That was for Penny, who came in with a custom order saying, my husband is really interested in cricket, can you put something together? So the design part was interesting because all I knew about cricket was those heat maps. So you see when the bowler comes in and the cricket, you see the colours by whether it's a 4, 6 or a 1s or 2s. So I tried to create something similar to that, based on all of the England's greatest cricketers. So the blog. This is, well, my most recent blog was actually on the CVs. So if you want to check out the CV that I showed on an earlier slide, then that is currently on the blog, and that came out of work. So there was an issue with the resourcing team at work, and I thought, well, let's have a think about how we can solve this, and that led to creating something in the blog. Another example was we were doing some work for Coca-Cola, and the data was in an awful format. And so I had to take it away and put it through a function called melt in R, and that turned it from our wide format into our long format that Tableau likes. And that came out of learning something through something that was needed to be done at work. So often things that you find are a necessity at work can lead to something that's really useful for when you're spending time doing stuff at home as well. The business. So I've learned tons since I launched Sports Chord a year ago. But the starting point for launching it was knowing that I had a good backing in finance and accounting, given that I was going through all the exams to become a chartered accountant. So using work to draw up things like inventory lists and exciting accounting stuff like that. And now that I'm coming to my year end, I'm able to put the knowledge that I gained about tax into practice and pay my taxes. So the work part really came into the business there, and it allowed me to start it and run it, and then get all the logistics behind it ready as well. And I put learning *2 here. I've got a couple of questions coming up. Customize color palettes. Okay, yeah, I can definitely put a blog on that. It's yeah, it's fairly intuitive, so I'll definitely put something out. I'm sure that has been spoken about today, and I think that these are being put on YouTube as well, so that might be helpful as well. The melt package, it's effectively a pivoting function. So often you'll have really wide data, lots of columns, and it'll turn into something that has lots of rows as opposed to lots of columns. But I can add a link to the blog post on that afterwards. Learning *2. So I spent a lot of time outside of work learning about doing online courses. The best way I found learning at home is downloading other people's workbooks. I think it's fantastic that Tableau allows you to do that, allows you to download someone else's work when you find something exciting and then try and reverse engineer that using your own data. It's always important to credit the person that you've downloaded it from, because often they'll be the ones that came up with the ideas and the table calculations themselves. But that is my number one way of learning, both through the actual capabilities of what Tableau can do, and also design, because there's some fantastic designs out there. So bringing it together, I find that often there are particularly in the consulting world, there are so many slide decks out there that it's quite refreshing for people in the corporate world to see something different. So learning from creating really arty things for my business, it's been possible to bring that kind of design into work and create things that they wouldn't have seen before. So it's important, given that the primary function of the sports core prints is to look nice on a wall, you don't want to lose the functionality and the key messages that something that you're creating at work are there to actually portray. But spicing things up a little always helps, especially when you need to present something to a large audience. Creating a community. So the Tableau community is fantastic for inspiring other people to do different things, and I think a great example of where someone has used that community and helped in their own work is probably Simon's NHS example. So he gave a talk at the London Tableau user group a while ago about his data. I'm not sure if they're called data ninjas or not, but the people that work for Simon, and that community is really important for driving more and more people to use these kind of tools within your own workplace. Bringing in new skills. So for me, the skills that I've picked up through running my business are something that I wouldn't have been able to get while I was at work, because I've been in charge. I'm relatively junior in my company. I've been in charge of running my own business and making the decisions, and that kind of outlook has been possible because I've been creating these visualizations in Tableau and R. And being able to bring those into your workplace gives you a bit of a boost over other people that haven't done similar things. And then learning *3. It's important to be learning at home and at work, but I found that over the last 2.5 years while I've been at work, my learning has changed from learning myself to starting to teach others about how to do different things. And that was one of the aims of our Data Ninja scheme. And that's really important, being able to share the stuff that you've done with other people, so that, well, first of all, so that all the requests don't fall on one person's shoulders and they can spread it out, but also because this way of analyzing data is it's the present, but it's also the future, importantly. So allowing as many people to do that as possible is really important. So I hope everyone has enjoyed that. It's pretty nicely branded there. Everything that I've done now goes through the business, but yeah, if you're interested, those couple of questions, both answers should be available on my blog, and I'll do a little post on the color palettes as well, if you're interested in that. So thanks very much, guys, and back to Simon and the team.